So I don't know if you guys are aware, but I've talked about the manga series Berserk a couple of times on this channel. And usually when it comes to that series, the question that I get asked the most by people is, how do I think Berserk is going to end? And my answer is always, I don't have a clue. I don't know how you wrap this up with a nice bow that's going to be satisfying to everybody. I don't know what that final panel is going to look like. I have no idea what Kentaro Miura was planning or what he told Koji Mori, who is now in, control of where the story is going to go and telling the artist what to make. And so I have no idea how it's going to end. But what I wanted to make this video about is my top 10 predictions of things that I think are going to happen in the story before it eventually ends. And see, it's kind of a double-edged sword because on one hand, I do like when I predict things and I am correct because, it gives you that slight little ego boost for a moment. But generally, I really enjoy not knowing where a story is going to go. I like to be surprised. I like to have the twist be very effective. I like to turn that page and see the next big event in the story and be like, I had no idea this was coming. That's what I actually prefer. So I don't know exactly what the ending's going to be, and I can't give you a made-up scenario in my mind without, probably writing a whole story myself to get there. But these are going to be my top 10 predictions of things that I think are very likely to happen before the end of the story. And I'm going to kind of rank them in order of least likely to what I think is most likely to happen before the story eventually ends. So here we go. Now, I do have a couple character deaths in this list, which I know is kind of a bland prediction, but I do think that we're going to have some casualties before the story ends. So my number 10 is, I believe Skull Knight is going to die before the end of the series. And I know that's kind of weird because he's so powerful, but I think that the reason is not necessarily a power scaling reason, but it's a story, like a thematic reason, is because I view Skull Knight as a cautionary tale for Guts. I actually view both Skull Knight and Zod as cautionary tales for Guts of what could happen to him if he doesn't resolve his traumatic issues and integrate the Beast of Darkness within himself. And, it's an example of what could become of him if he only pursues vengeance and rage and eventually succumbs to the Berserker armor, which is what happened to Skull Knight. He is a remnant of a grudge, as he calls himself. And so, because of those reasons, I feel like Skull Knight is probably not going to make it to the end of the story because he is that cautionary tale. I also think, he is that remnant of the past that probably should not exist anymore. He's something that is kind of lingering from a forgotten age. He's the fallen king, whatever you want to call him, King Geyserich. I do think that he represents this cautionary tale for Guts, and because of that reason, he's not going to make it to the end of the story. How he gets killed, why he gets killed, whether his spirit of vengeance is separated from the Skull Knight armor, or whether he's physically killed by the God Hand or something. I'm not sure how it's going to happen, but I don't see Skull Knight making it. Skull Knight does not have a happy ending. He's already sealed his fate. Like, he's not going to make it to the end. My number 9 prediction before the end of the story is kind of a double one, where I think that Griffith is going to somehow get either depowered or separated from the Moonlight Boy. So one of the biggest complications in the story right now is the existence of the Moonlight Boy. And obviously, just to recap, Guts gets Casca pregnant. Casca, the eclipse happens, and the fetus is corrupted by Griffith, giving it kind of like an astral entity, a power, basically, this weird demonic creature. The creature gets consumed by the egg of the perfect world that brings Griffith into the physical, fusing the two bodies together. And now Griffith is kind of in this trapped state that he's inadvertently caused himself, which is kind of like the thematic brilliance of it, at least I think, is that, if he were not to have acted upon his like petty human grudges, then the Moonlight Boy would never exist in the first place. And so he basically caused his own downfall, which I really, really enjoy. They're fused together, so the Moonlight Boy does have some influence in Griffith, where he is I believe, incapable of harming Casca. And there's evidence of this multiple times, where he saves Casca from the falling rocks, where he leaves as soon as he sees this happen, where the Moonlight Boy constantly goes back to see Casca, which is why I believe he brought her to Falconia, because that way he doesn't have to travel across the world whenever the Moonlight Boy takes over. He obviously doesn't have control when the Moonlight Boy takes over, so, it's this huge, massive weakness that he has. And I also think the story has been leading, and has said this a couple of times, where Skull Knight has talked to Guts and said her wish may not be your wish when it comes to Casca, and I think it's going to be that confliction between vengeance and, you know, wanting the Moonlight Boy to live. Like, can they, like, in order to kill Griffith, you must kill the Moonlight Boy as well. So what do you actually want? Do you want your child? Do you want to be able to have some semblance of happiness? Are you going to be forced to kill your child in order to enact this vengeance? Is it worth it in the long run? All of those kind of things. But I think what it will ultimately culminate towards, I don't know how, you know, this is like, I don't know how Berserk's going to end. I don't know. But what I think it'll culminate towards is some kind of separation between the Moonlight Boy and Griffith, whether that means they literally like split into two different entities, or whether that means that the Moonlight Boy persona will take over in a permanent way. You know, I also think there's like teases of this early on where you see Griffith imagining a potential future, you know, if he had been with Casca, if he had allowed himself to heal as much as he could, and they have a child named Guts. You know, this would kind of be the reverse of it, where it would be Guts and Casca, and then they'd have a child that is Griffith in some way, but not really. But I think there's going to be a separation between the two. And I also think when you have characters as powerful as the God Hand, as powerful as Griffith is, you know, you can't just give Guts power-ups after power-up after power-up. You can't just make him God level. You know, that would, I feel, take away from the whole humanity aspect of the character and the story, and would just be silly and would feel too overly shonen. Like, I just feel like you can't really do that. So the only way you could realistically do it is to not power up Guts, but to depower Griffith in some way. So that's what I think is going to happen. My number 8 is kind of related to that, and I believe Casca will be the one to either kill Griffith or give the final word as to what they're going to do in that situation, whether the Moonlight Boy takes over, whether they split into two different entities and, you know, Casca is the one to kill Griffith, or if Casca has some kind of influence and ability to have the Moonlight Boy persona take over completely. I think Casca will be the one to get the final say. I don't think that Guts will be the one to kill Griffith. I think that the story is going to subvert our expectations because you would expect that to happen. I think it would be really unique if they kind of flipped the script and Casca was the one to do it. Also, I think Casca has just as much reason to do it as Guts does. And I also think if Guts kind of followed through with it and was the one to do it, it would kind of maybe solidify him falling into that, you know, perpetual state of vengeance and Beast of Darkness that created Skull Knight, and would kind of be a little bit of the opposite of kind of what the story's been building towards. So I think Casca is going to be the one to kill Griffith if Griffith is, you know, killed in a conventional way. My number 7 is going to be another character death, and I've been saying this one for a while. I think if any of the main cast that we are following now were to die, it would be Farnese. I think this for many different reasons, but I think that her death would affect the group the most as a whole, because she has a very specific dynamic with each and every character. You know, she's like a sister to Casca. She's literally a sister to Serpico. Roderick is in love with her. She's the student of Shirike. She's in love with Guts in her own way. She has all of these very specific dynamics between all the characters. She's also the most developed character beyond Guts himself, you know, where she's had the biggest transition from her introduction to who she is now as a person. So I think that her death, not that I want it to happen, but I think it would have the most amount of impact, it would have the most amount of resonance, and it would be the most compelling in the story. You know, I don't see any other character minus Guts or Casca, their deaths having as much of an effect on the audience and the cast as Farnese was. Farnese would be a extremely tragic death that would affect the characters the most out of any other character. So I think if there is one that's going to go, it's going to be Farnese. My number 6, I kind of already talked about it. It's going to be an integration of the Beast of Darkness. So I think when you look at the Beast of Darkness as an idea, as this representation of somebody that's gone through intense pain and trauma, and how that kind of builds up into its own entity in a way. When you look at the Skull Knight, when you look at all the apostles that reached their breaking point and couldn't take it anymore and decided to sacrifice somebody, everybody that gives themselves over into that darkness, how it's so common, how it's so likely, and Guts is the struggler, the person, hopefully, that we're watching that is going to overcome this in a way. If you look at the Carl Jung influences and the integration of the Beast of Darkness, basically what that's going to mean, it'll probably have some kind of like magical component with the Berserker armor, but in like just a general idea aspect of it, it's, you know, you take that pain, you take that trauma, you take that turmoil, you take that struggle, and instead of letting that pain control you, you know, instead of letting the beast of darkness take over and you lose yourself to it, you know, instead you switch that around and you utilize that pain and you utilize that darkness in order to help you do what you want to do, right? It's like you control your pain instead of allowing your pain to control you, which is a very difficult thing to do. And it's going to require probably a lot of introspective, maybe inside of Guts' mind. I've always wanted to see another chapter where Guts and the Beast of Darkness are having a conversation kind of similar to in Godot's cave. I've always wanted to see that moment where he rises and overcomes it. And there's been moments of this. You know, we've seen moments where he kind of controls the Berserker armor and we get that kind of Batman Guts looking, you know, design, which I'm not really a big fan of the design, but the idea there is cool. And so many times, you know, we've seen other characters like Shirkei or the Moonlight Boy, you know, bring Guts back to his senses instead of letting the Beast of Darkness take over. There's going to be a moment in the manga, I believe, where Guts has to do it himself. Just like all of us, we have to do it. You know, it's always nice to have somebody there to help us, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to do it ourselves. We have to learn a way to manage our pain ourselves. And I think that is kind of, at least in my opinion, I might be wrong. In my opinion, that is kind of the core lesson of Berserk. It's not allowing that pain and that trauma from our past control us, and instead be able to integrate it in a way to help us. My number 5 prediction is I think before the end of the manga, we're going to see Chich again. So there's a very sad 3-chapter arc of a flashback of Guts remembering a time where he maybe sort of saw an elf, and this little tiny cute elf character helped him heal at supposedly the expense of her own life. So she was in this jail cell and there was this tiny little plant and she was using all of the leaves to help Guts. And after she used them all, it was assumed that she lost all of her power. She lost all of her life energy and she passed away and Guts never saw her again. Well, I think that that was a deliberate setup because those chapters are shown right before they get to Elfhelm. And what we've seen about Elfhelm with the giant spirit tree is that there's these spirit trees that kind of tether these astral creatures to the physical world. And once they are destroyed, this is why Griffith was going all around the world and destroying, you know, Flora's spirit tree. Like he was destroying all these spirit trees to wipe away the astral creatures, right? So what we learn is that Chich did not die. Her tether to the physical world was severed, so she faded back into the astral world. There was no longer an overlap. So we think that Chich died, and it was very sad, but as we've learned throughout the rest of the story, is that it just means that she was kind of taken away from the physical. So Chich is still alive, and I do believe that we are going to see her again in some way. How that will happen, I don't know, but I believe that there will be a chapter where Chich shows up once again. All right, my number 4 prediction is that in Falconia, there will be a mass sacrifice, but it will be by choice of everyone there. And here's why. There's one little detail of the story that has never been fully addressed or explained. I believe it's important. I've heard other people say it's just it was just an aesthetic choice and it doesn't mean anything, but I think that it's very, very significant, and I think it plays into the story. And that is when Guts and company were going to rescue Griffith from the torture chamber, and they're giving the little backstory about King Geyserich and the kingdom that he once had and how it fell and yada yada. We see a bunch of corpses at the very, very bottom ground level of this this tower, this torture chamber, whatever it is. And all of these corpses have the brand of sacrifice on their forehead. And there's 2 things that are extremely strange about this. Number 1 is that all the brands are in the same exact spot. They're all on their foreheads. Every corpse has a brand of sacrifice on their foreheads. This is completely different than how we've seen it before because the brand lands wherever it lands. You know, if some people get it on their hand, Guts has it on his neck, Casca has it on her chest. So the fact that they're all specifically on the forehead is very, very different. Also, the corpses are there, okay? In the eclipse, in the sacrifices we've seen, the bodies are consumed by the apostles. They are eaten. They are, you know, ripped apart into pieces. So all these corpses still actually being here as full body corpses and all of the brands on their foreheads means that this is a completely different type of sacrifice than we've ever seen before. Also, it was the sacrifice that happened, assumingly, right before King Geyseric's kingdom was destroyed. I believe we are on course to have a similar event play out, and we are going to see whatever this type of sacrifice is. And I think that it is a mass willing sacrifice. I think these brands are going to be put on their foreheads because they are going to believe in Griffith. They're going to believe in his leadership, or what's going to happen, whether the God Hand shows up, I don't know. But I think that these people are going to be convinced that they have to follow their Messiah, follow their guide, that kind of blind faith idea that's presented in the story a couple of times, and they are going to willingly sacrifice themselves. And I think this is a completely different type of sacrifice that will ultimately probably just recreate the same events. Like somehow this whole kingdom will be destroyed, humanity will have to start over, and it's this constant, 1,000-year cycle of build up and destruction that constantly happens. That's my prediction for that. My number 3 prediction is again a two-parter, where I believe that Guts will defeat Zod in combat and Zod will betray Griffith. Now, I do not think Zod is going to turn good. All right, but I think there are reasons to believe that he will betray Griffith at some point. And I also think if you look at the progress of Guts versus Zod, the first time they met each other, Zod kicked his ass. The second time, they were pretty much equal. Then there was a time where they teamed up to fight Ganishka. So I believe that by the next time that Guts and Zod fight, Guts will defeat Zod. We've also known that Zod is loyal to somebody that is able to defeat him in combat, and we've also seen instances of Zod questioning Griffith's decisions or kind of like making strange faces at him or kind of, I don't know, he seems to be questioning Griffith's authority a little bit, but still going along with it. And I think the catalyst that would allow him to betray Griffith is if Guts defeats him. And I think there would be a temporary alliance similar to how when they fought Ganishka. Even more than that, my number 2 is that I believe Sonya will betray Griffith as well. Now, she is Griffith's most loyal follower. She's in love with him. She's obsessed with him. He's her hero. She's very important to him. So you think, why would Sonya betray Griffith? Well, that's why I think it would be the most unique in the story, is if you took his most loyal follower and then she was the one that shifted. And I think there is evidence for this as well, because she has these kind of clairvoyant abilities and her jealousy for Griffith, talking to any other girl, whether it's Charlotte or now Casca. Now, I believe that Casca's appearance in Falconia and how good of care Griffith is taking of her, I think this is going to spark Sonya's jealousy and curiosity. I think she's going to check out Casca and try to figure out who this woman is. And unlike any other character, with Sonya's clairvoyant abilities, she may be able to peer into Casca's mind. So she may be the character that actually gets to see the eclipse firsthand more than anybody else does. We've also seen that she's able to kind of communicate with other people on like a massive scale, where she was able to give the entire message of Griffith's army when he was fighting Ganishka to all the humans. So what if Sonya is able to take those mental images of the eclipse and project them into Griffith's followers to let them see the real Griffith? And also, she's already friends with Shirake. So there's precedence for her switching sides. And I also think because she's the most loyal, it would be the most unique decision to make in the story. And my number 1 prediction, if you know my channel, you already know what it is. Been saying this forever, and this is the only one where, if it happens, I need you guys to all go on social media and just hashtag Ryan was right. I've always said the Dragon Slayer is going to become the next Beylit sword. Skull Knight has this brilliant idea of repurposing the Beylits in order to create a rift in dimensions. He forged his sword with the Beylits in order to slice through dimensions in an attempt to send the God Hand to hell. First of all, that's metal as fuck. But he attempted to do it and was quickly shown that he was not able to. Now, whether that's because he had already used the Beylit sword once before and maybe it weakened it, I don't know. Or maybe he just doesn't have the right tool for the job. Whereas with Guts, it has been shown time and time again that because of all the apostles he's slayed, that his sword has a bit of an astral ability to it, that he's able to harm on a physical and astral level. That's how he was able to harm Ganishka. That's why his sword is so extra powerful. And if we look at that, and we take the ability that the Dragon Slayer already has, combine it with the idea of forging it with Beilets to create a Beilet sword, I think that would be the most powerful weapon in the story. And I think Skull Knight had the right idea, he just didn't have the right tool for the job. I think the Dragon Slayer will be that tool. And what I think will be the X factor in making this work, let's bring it all back. The Beilet that Guts has with him that he's been carrying from the beginning of the story. No, he will not use it to sacrifice his friends to become an apostle, which wouldn't work anyways against Griffith because it's stupid. But what he will do, what I do believe, is that by carrying this Beilet around, this is headcanon, by the way, this is headcanon, but by carrying the Beilet around with him, I believe that he has influenced the Beilet with his desire, because that's what these things are all based on. It's based upon desire. It's based upon despair. It's based upon, you know, somebody being in their weakest moment, and that's when it activates, you know. And I think that by carrying it around with him, with Puck's influence, because Puck and the Beilet, you know, have been very close, I think it's going to help, I guess, for lack of a better word, energize this Beilet. And you use that Beilet to forge into the Dragon Slayer, and that will make the Dragon Slayer even more powerful because it's been feeding on Guts' desire for all of this time. And so that's what I think is going to happen. So I think the Dragon Slayer is going to become the next Beilet sword, and they're going to fuse the Beilet that Guts has been carrying with him into the sword, and that's how it's going to happen. I also think that would be more creative because that's a bit of a bait and switch, because what you're waiting for is the Beilet to be used in a traditional way. You're waiting for somebody to make a sacrifice. I think it would be more creative and better storytelling if you subverted that expectation and you used the Beilet for a different purpose, just like how Skull Knight is capable to repurpose the Beilets like he's done before. You do this with the Beilet that Guts has been carrying around with him, and that's how you create the ultimate weapon against the God Hand. So there you guys go. Probably a longer video than I wanted to make. I wanted to make it a bit shorter, but, you know, I need to explain. I need to explain my reasons. So those are my top 10 predictions for what's going to happen in the Berserk story before the end. I don't know what the ending is going to be, but I think these are the things that are likely to happen. And I also wanted to comprise them all in one video so that if any of them do happen, maybe none of them will, but if any of them do, you know, I can look back and be like, hey, look, I predicted that. But I could be completely fucking wrong on all of it. I don't know. Maybe Guts is going to sacrifice all his friends, become an apostle, and everyone's going to die, and nothing matters. I don't know. So let me know what you guys think. Also, if you want to, go ahead and comment your Berserk predictions. Like, what do you think is going to happen before the end of the story? You could do your top prediction, top 5, or top 10 like I did. You could just comment on mine and tell me I'm dumb. Or you could say, hey, that was actually a pretty good idea. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the middle, but we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. Please like the video and comment to help it out in the algorithm. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have a Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, and all the social media links where you can follow me down below. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.